Welcome to another edition of Geopolitics and Empire. As always, support the podcast. Best way you can do that is by becoming a paid subscriber on the Substack. I do a weekly analysis for supporters only. We do off-the-record Zoom calls with supporters only. You could donate. And thanks for the few people who have already become Apple subscribers. So remember, if you're listening to this in a podcast player, for free, you've got ads inserted now. That's the only way I can continue forward. But there's an ad-free edition for $50 a year, $5 a month. So you can sign up on Apple subscriptions to get access to that. And soon I'll have Supercast set up as well, which will allow you to listen to on any other podcast player to the ad-free version. And check out the affiliates, as always, StartMail, Above Phone, Societatis Civis, Wise Wolf Gold, Escape to Technocracy, and you can purchase a consult if you want to chat with me about expatriation, the New World Order, whatever you like. Joining us for the first time is engineer turned state representative turned business professor, Dr. Jon Padfield. His website is businessreform.org, and he's got a fantastic YouTube channel at YouTube at Business Reform. The link is in the description. Welcome, Dr. Padfield.
Thank you. I am very happy to be with you today and to talk to you and to your listeners.
So I recently discovered your channel maybe like a month or two ago, and I was blown away. Your channel is blowing up, and you talk privacy, surveillance, censorship. You've been talking about Above Phone, the de-Googled phone, which I'm affiliate of, and I recently had Hakeem of Above Phone on. You talk about Brex, forget his name, Brexman, his phone, all these sort of things, Flock, Palantir, social credit. And so really great work that you're doing. If you want, whatever you want to tell us about yourself and then how you got sort of into YouTubing on privacy and the surveillance state.
Wow, where to start? Thank you for that introduction. My background is electrical engineering. I graduated from Purdue University in 1988, went to work in the automotive industry, spent 15 years in the automotive industry working on electronics. Along the way, I ran for state representative, and I was elected to 2 terms in the Indiana House. Indiana has a part-time legislature, so I continued working a corporate job while serving in the state legislature. It was during that time that I was in the legislature that privacy started becoming an issue. And I was elected in 1994 and in 1996. And if you think about what a video camera looked like pre-1994, they were shoulder mount. You would see cameramen running up and down the sideline of an NFL game carrying something the size of a microwave oven on their shoulder. That was what cameras looked like in the 1980s. They were huge. They took VHS tapes. But during the 1990s, cameras this big became cameras this big. They went from shoulder mount cameras to palm cameras, and today they are so tiny that you can hide them in just about anything. But the point is, while I was in the legislature, hidden video cameras started becoming an issue. Landlords started putting them in bathrooms of apartment buildings and things like that they were renting to co-eds. All of a sudden, cameras are showing up hidden in planters in women's locker rooms and things like that. And unfortunately, at that time, there was not any legislation because this had never been a problem before. And so I was one of several legislators that worked on a piece of legislation to regulate the use of cameras. And I want to stress to everyone, this is challenging. How do you write a piece of legislation and word it in such a way to prohibit what you don't want done without accidentally prohibiting things that you do want done? The first draft of the bill, and this is before I got involved, the first draft of the bill simply said it is illegal to video record anyone without their written permission. Okay, from a privacy standpoint, that may sound good, but now let's talk about undercover investigative journalism. You have a elected official who you believe is taking bribes, they're meeting with people. You have to have their written permission before you record them taking a bribe. So that first draft of the bill just wasn't feasible. And then the second draft of the bill, and again, this is before I got involved, it made it illegal to video record anyone unless you are a, quote, legitimate news outlet. And when I read that, I laughed out loud and I said, can you please define for me what is a legitimate news outlet? How does that differ from an illegitimate news outlet? And basically somebody was thinking, well, if they're a member of the Indiana Press Association, no. That's not a good definition of what's legitimate and what's not. And so I got involved and helped draft language. What we ended up passing listed, I believe it was 8 specific areas. It is illegal to video record someone in a shower room, in a locker room, in a tanning salon, in several places, changing rooms in a clothing store. It listed about 8 specific places that it is illegal to record someone. And then the last one was, or anywhere a person has a reasonable expectation of privacy. And I am fully aware that is vague. It's vague on purpose because we as legislators could not anticipate every possible situation that might happen in the future. And we decided this last one, we are giving permission to the jury to decide in the event of a accusation somebody recorded me where they shouldn't. We're trusting a jury to come to the right conclusion because we don't know the circumstances that might happen in the future. So anyway, that was my first introduction to really getting involved in privacy policy, was helping to draft that Indiana law clear back in the 1990s. After leaving the legislature, I served 2 terms. I did not run for a 3rd term. After leaving the legislature, I was still very privacy sensitive, been a privacy advocate for many years. And fast forward to becoming a business professor, I have the technical understanding of having been an electrical engineer for a number of years. I have legislative experience, and now I teach as a business professor. I understand how data is collected. I understand why it's collected. I understand how it's monetized. Whether you're Facebook, whether you're Uber, virtually any app that you have on your phone, there's a really good chance that app is collecting and selling your data. And I want to stress something. Even the ones that say, we promise we will never sell your data, they need to put an asterisk on that. They may not sell your data for money. They just share it with their business partners. Okay, who are your business partners? Anyone that gives us money. So it's a word game. We didn't sell it. We just shared it with people that gave us money in exchange. Very, very underhanded, very sneaky. My YouTube channel is called Business Reform, and I selected that name clear back in June of 2022 when I started the channel, because as a business professor, I have seen so many companies doing shady things. They're legal, but they're shady. They mislead people. They, in my opinion, in many cases, they exploit people's ignorance. And I don't mean that as a derogatory statement on people, but the companies have an advantage because they know what their app or they know what their service is doing. You don't. And they will describe it in flowery words that really don't mean anything. What grates on me is when I hear somebody like Mark Zuckerberg saying, we respect your privacy. Bull. No, you don't. You say that, but what does that mean? Does that mean you're not going to sell my data? Oh, no, it doesn't mean that. Then how do you respect my privacy? So anyway, didn't mean to take off on a tangent there, but this is where I'm coming from. I have been very sensitive about privacy issues for decades, since back in the 90s when I served in the legislature. I understand the technology, being an engineer. My doctorate is in technology leadership and innovation, which is really a hybrid between an engineering degree and a business degree. Technology leadership and innovation is about commercialization of technology, because new technology is being invented all the time. Much of it never becomes commercialized. In other words, it's a solution searching for a problem to solve. And there are things patented every day that you're never going to see for sale because there's just no market demand for it. So this combination of background, understanding the technology, understanding the commercialization, understanding the legislative side, I feel like it puts me in a somewhat unique position to comment on and explain some of the technologies that are being used today, often to the detriment of the people using that technology.
You've established your credentials and credibility. And by all means, go on a rant. People are here primarily to listen to you and not me. And I want to keep the data collection point you just made in the back of our minds. I want to get to that because I think that's one of the most important topics as relates to everything else we'll be talking about. But before then, going further into privacy tech, surveillance, censorship, I thought maybe we can start with the root of the problem. Why are we even having to discuss more and more about these things of privacy and surveillance and censorship? And so this obviously means that our governments are increasingly becoming more and more insane and authoritarian, tyrannical, yes, totalitarian, coupled with the businesses and corporations. What Cobra Commander Klaus Schwab, as I like to call him, by the way, he's back. He just tweeted a few days ago. Yeah, he's got a new book out. It's that public-private partnership, which is effectively, it's known as fascism in the old days, but I think what we're up against is this globalism. It's an amalgamation of all of the worst isms together. It's fascism, it's communism, it's technocracy, it's algocracy, it's globalism, it's monopoly capitalism. And so just before getting to that stuff, just any thoughts on that, the root of the problem?
Oh, I could spend hours talking about the root of the problem. Let me share this with you and your audience. Let's go back to 1983. In 1983, Apple Computer came out with a game-changing device known as the Apple Profile. And the Apple Profile was Apple's first hard drive. Now, I want you to picture this. This is a hard drive. It's 16 inches long. It's, I believe, 10 inches wide and 3 inches thick. We're talking bigger than a shoebox. That's the Profile. It cost $3,500. It weighed 20 pounds. And would you care to guess how much storage it had? How much storage could you fit into 3 inches by 16 inches by 10 inches?
Probably less than 100 megabytes?
5 megabytes. 5 megabytes. When I take a picture with my iPhone today, and I am in process of transitioning. I've been in the Apple ecosystem for many, many years. But I recently purchased an above phone, a very privacy-focused phone. I have apps that I have to have on a phone for my employment. I work for a university, and there are some authentication apps. So I still have an iPhone that I use for work because I have to have this app. But I have an above phone that I also use for privacy reasons. So I'm very thankful that they're out there and thankful that they're making a much more private alternative to the mainstream. But anyway, getting back to the Apple ecosystem, Apple makes this 5 megabyte hard drive in 1983 for $3,500. It weighs 20 pounds. 5 megabytes is so minuscule by today's standards. One photograph on your smartphone can be 20 to 25 megabytes. So let's convert 5 megabytes into something more reasonable, 1 gigabyte. It would take 200 of these 1983 hard drives to give me 1 gigabyte of storage. And again, just as a mental exercise, I described the size of a 5 megabyte hard drive. If I had 200 of those, that's 4 foot by 4 foot by 7 foot. We're talking an industrial freezer. It would weigh 4,000 pounds and it would cost $700,000. And that doesn't even include all of the cables that you need for it. But $700,000 to store 1 gigabyte, and it's the size of an industrial freezer. Fast forward from 1983 to 2025. I can now get a micro SD card about 1/4 the size of a postage stamp that holds 1 terabyte. That is 1,000 gigabyte. And if I do the math, if I divide that micro SD card by 1,000 to get it down to 1 gigabyte, it's the size of 1 grain of sugar. So in 42 years, from 1983 to 2025, 1 gigabyte has gone from the size of an industrial freezer to the size of 1 grain of sugar, and it's gone from $700,000 to roughly 1 cent. That is why we have no privacy. I remember back in the early 2000s when I got my first digital camera. It was not a phone, it was a standalone digital camera. It took a CF card. A CF card is about 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. And this was amazing. I didn't have to have film. I didn't have to send film off to be developed. I could take almost 30 pictures on this CF card, download it to my laptop, wipe it clean, and go out and take another 30 pictures. That was a game changer. When was the last time you deleted photos off of your phone to make room for taking more photos? The point is, the technology has come so far, nobody goes back through their phone to delete old photos because they don't have room for new photos. The cost of digital storage has gotten so small and so cheap, nobody deletes anything anymore. And now we're seeing things like security cameras that will record 24/7 because it's so cheap. And now companies, they will record your browsing. They will record your order history. They will record video if they can get access to your cameras. But all of this data is being recorded nonstop because storage is virtually free. And I don't like I don't like innuendo. When I talk about somebody doing something, I like to name names. And one of those names is Larry Ellison. Larry Ellison made the news in September of this year when he briefly became the wealthiest man in the world. His wealth eclipsed Elon Musk for a short time in September. Larry Ellison is the chairman of the board at Oracle. And when Oracle stock spiked back in September, temporarily he became the wealthiest man in the country. The reason I bring him up is because of some things that he has said. When his net worth doubled because the price of Oracle stock went up, first thing he did is he went out and he bought Paramount. And with Paramount, there's a whole bunch of properties. I think he got about 14 cable channels. He got some kids' cartoon networks. He got a whole bunch of things. Most people don't realize this, but in the United States, 80% of the media we consume is controlled by 5 companies. You've got Paramount, you've got Comcast, you got Disney. Off the top of my head, I can't think who the others are, but 5 companies control 80% of the media. That's all the TV stations, the cable channels, movie studios, etc. So Larry owns 1/5 of 80% of the media. His son is currently trying to buy another of those 5 companies. If his son is successful, and this has to be approved by the Security Exchange Commission, in my opinion, allowing the Ellison family to control 2 of the 5 companies that own 80% of all media, to me, that is, you're rapidly approaching monopoly status. I am really hoping that the administration blocks that takeover. However, there are numerous photos of Larry Ellison standing in the Oval Office with Donald Trump, and I am not at all optimistic that the SEC is going to intervene to prevent Larry and his son from controlling 40% of the media in the United States. The reason I bring Larry up, not just because he's wealthy, but because of statements that he has made. In September 2024, he said, and this is public record, it's something that he said during an investor call talking to Oracle investors. He said, and forgive me if I'm off by a word or two, I'm quoting this from memory, but he said, "We are going to have supervision." He said, "We are going to be recorded constantly from body cameras, from dash cameras, from doorbell cameras, that all of that is going to be analyzed by AI and that people will be on their best behavior because they know that they are always being recorded." I find that abhorrent. You did not ask my permission to record me 24/7. And over my shoulders, I have a Statue of Liberty over this shoulder. And over this shoulder, I'm Christian. I'm not worshiping this, but that is Athena, the Greek goddess of wisdom and war. And I have that up there as a metaphor. The goddess of wisdom and war. Why wisdom and war? Well, because you need to be very smart about what you do battle with. But I have Athena and the Statue of Liberty because what am I willing to sacrifice my time, my effort on protecting liberty? And what Larry Ellison is trying to do is create a dystopia, this AI powered, AI monitored. I half jokingly refer to it as our AI overlords because AI, according to who was the richest man in the world, now the second richest man in the world, he is building the infrastructure to ensure that we have zero privacy. You step outside of your house, you will be on camera. If you're inside your house, we're going to be watching everything that you do online. But I find these completely incompatible with a free society. And I believe that what he and others, you want another name? Garrett Langley, the CEO of Flock Safety. Flock Safety currently has 80,000 AI-powered cameras across the United States tracking where every license plate goes. And they have made statements about with their AI network, they can track a car going across the country. I'm fully aware of that because all of their cameras are networked together. Doesn't matter where that camera is located, it's sending data back to Flock servers. But they have said we can track a car going cross country, and if it doesn't have a legitimate reason for doing so, we can flag the police. And I thought, wait a minute, who gave you the right to determine if my cross-country trip is legitimate or not? If I decide on a whim that I want to go see the Grand Canyon, whose permission do I have to ask to do that? Just because I don't have a business need to go to the Grand Canyon, or maybe I don't go to the Grand Canyon, maybe I'm interested in UFOs and I want to go to Roswell. But wherever I decide to go, that is my business. That is not Garrett Langley's business. That is not law enforcement's business. It is not a free country when I have to justify to a third party, well, why did you make this trip? None of your business. Was a crime committed? Am I a suspect? The Fourth Amendment, I feel like I'm getting on a rant here, but bear with me. I'm a big fan of our Constitution. Our Constitution was well thought out by good-intentioned people who wanted to safeguard our liberty. Patrick Henry is one of my favorite figures from the American Revolution. Patrick Henry, he was elected to 4 terms as governor of the state of Virginia. But Patrick Henry said, guard with jealous attention the public liberty. Suspect anyone that approaches that precious jewel. And I wholeheartedly agree with Patrick Henry on that. Suspect anyone that approaches the public liberty. The last part of his quote was, unfortunately, nothing will protect it but downright force. And I want to avoid that. I don't want it to come to that. I want to go through every legal means to protect the public liberty, which means pushing back on the surveillance state before the gate closes and we're all locked in. So Flock Safety, Garrett Langley, along with people like Larry Ellison, along with people like Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel is one of the co-founders of Palantir. And I find this fascinating. There's a term people use, the PayPal Mafia, because Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, and a few others all got together. They worked. They created They created PayPal. PayPal was unique. If you go back into the 1980s, you had major payment processors, Visa, MasterCard. They're giving out credit cards. And credit cards are accepted by major retailers, Walmart, Sears, Kmart, the big companies back then. Some of them no longer are with us. But MasterCard, Visa, Discover, American Express, they have deals with major retailers. Then the 1990s hit, the e-commerce boom hits, and now you've got people that are setting up websites, selling things directly from their website. Companies like Visa and MasterCard want nothing to do with them. It's not because the companies are illegitimate, but they are so low volume. Visa and MasterCard look at it as you're more trouble than you're worth. You're only going to have $10,000 worth of sales for the year. Our cut off of that is going to be minuscule. We don't have time of day to give you. That's when some very smart people like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel got together and said, we have a solution. We'll be a middleman. We will let the big credit card companies work with us, and then we will work with all of these small independent companies, people that want to sell online, but Visa and MasterCard don't want to deal with them. So PayPal was created to serve a very particular need. They were the first. Today they have many competitors, but they were the first in this space. When Elon and Peter Thiel sold PayPal, they walked away with a lot of money. Peter Thiel turns around and, this is in the early 2000s, 9/11 happens, and Peter Thiel gets the idea, we can take some of the anti-fraud technology that we developed for PayPal and we can apply that to U.S. Treasury, and we can start looking for terrorists using this technology that we developed. So Peter Thiel gets with his college buddy, Alexander Karp. They found Palantir. I believe it was 2003 when they founded Palantir. But they were using technology developed for PayPal with the idea of we can look for terrorists using this. About a year after the company's founded, the CIA gives a bunch of money to Palantir. This is public record. I don't say anything that I can't back up. But the CIA has a venture capital arm called NQTel, and they invest in what they see as promising technologies that would be of interest to the intelligence community. So the CIA gives about $2 million to Palantir, helps them get up and running. A couple years later, they're getting major U.S. contracts. Since the Trump administration took over January 20th of this year, Palantir has already received, as of October, we're not even talking a full year, January 20th through early October, Palantir has received 251 U.S. contracts from the federal government. That has caused their stock to absolutely go through the roof. But anyway, the reason I bring them up, Garrett Langley founds Flock Safety in 2017. Guess who shows up to give him money? Peter Thiel. So you have one company specializing in, we are going to record everybody's license plate in the country. And then you have Palantir, who is involved in predictive policing with agencies like the Los Angeles Police Department. Peter Thiel of Palantir giving money to Garrett Langley at Flock Safety to develop this. And now we have all of these contracts, 80,000 plus Flock Safety cameras all over the country. So Flock is involved in the data collection. They have their own AI so that they can flag suspicious behavior, like you drove into the neighboring state without a good reason. We need to let the local police know about this so they can investigate you. And then we have Palantir, who's using that for predictive policing. Anyone not familiar with predictive policing, go watch the movie Minority Report with Tom Cruise from the early 1990s. Predictive policing basically means we're going to go investigate you before you commit a crime. Now, I've been on a rant here for a minute, but I want to circle back to the Fourth Amendment. The Fourth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution says that we the people, we have a right to be secure in our homes, our papers, our effects. And what that means is police cannot just show up at our door and say, I'm going to come in and search your place because you might be doing something wrong. If a crime has been committed, if police are investigating the crime, if police have reason to believe that you were involved in this crime they are investigating, they can go to an elected judge, they can present the evidence that they have against you, and if they have sufficient evidence, the standard is called probable cause. If they can convince the judge it is likely that you are guilty, the judge will sign a search warrant. And when the police show up at someone's door with a search warrant signed by a judge, that gives them the legal right to come into your house and search. Without probable cause, they don't get a search warrant. They can't come in and search you. And what companies like Flock are doing is they are turning the Fourth Amendment on its head. No crime has been committed, but our AI said that you driving back and forth here is suspicious, so why don't you go investigate that person and see if you can find any crimes that they've been involved in? Completely backwards from what the Fourth Amendment was created for. And I'm also going to point the finger at law enforcement here. Law enforcement is saying we need this technology to solve crimes. Great. Go get a warrant. Well, no, that's not the way it works. If a crime's been committed, we're going to use flock safety to generate a list of suspects. No, that's not the way it works. You are doing a search of thousands and thousands of innocent people to find one person that might be guilty. Where's your warrant? And their argument is, we don't need a warrant. This is publicly available information. Okay, let's take a time out here and talk about this. The Fourth Amendment regulates the government. The government cannot go out and do a warrantless search. The Fourth Amendment does not prohibit a private company from going out and doing a warrantless search. What we're seeing is law enforcement and the private sector, in my terms, colluding to violate the Fourth Amendment. I can't violate the Fourth Amendment, but here's some money. Will you go violate the Fourth Amendment for me? And then after you violate the Fourth Amendment, can you share the results with me? It's an end run around the Constitution. This is a public-private partnership. Let's look at flock safety. If I go out and I start a private company, can I go start pounding poles into the right-of-way alongside a public road? No. I would be arrested for that. Because as a private company, I can't just go start putting things in public right-of-ways. So what we're seeing is a private company acting like government, mounting equipment in places that most private companies don't have access. So we have government granting a private company the right to put equipment into public right-of-ways so that they can collect data that the government would be prohibited from collecting on their own. I really hope that this gets undone. The Institute for Justice has a lawsuit filed against the city of Norfolk, Virginia, over their use of flock safety cameras. And that lawsuit should be headed to a jury sometime in the very near future. And based on the 2018 U.S. Supreme Court decision in the Carpenter case, I think there's a very good chance that the Institute for Justice is going to win. So I'm sorry, that's been a long rant, but I'm passionate on this. That's why I have a lot to say on that.
It's like a university lecture. And I was going to mention, I also have a very similar, it's hard to see, it's in the background. It's next to my terracotta soldier there. Also a Statue of Liberty, which I picked up maybe 15 plus years ago in Las Vegas at the Zombie Apocalypse store in Las Vegas. And you pull out the arm and it's a knife. So
Cool.
It's a nice item there. But you're hitting on a lot of what I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you, what are some of the major threats and trends, to map out where we are in terms of danger of the surveillance, censorship, and privacy? And, let me know your thoughts, because for the past 5 years, I just see basically one singular threat that's just a combination of all of the worries when it comes to privacy and censorship and surveillance. I told you before we hit record. I mean, it's effectively, there's many names for this. You sort of gave us the background context and history, some of which I was not aware of, to how we got here now. It's the technology, right? Mm-hmm. It's they want to make money. It's making some people's jobs easier. It's now beginning, that technology has made maybe in some ways the Constitution or certain laws outdated, or there needs to be some update somewhere. And you mentioned Ellison. I was going to ask you. You have Palantir. You've got Palmer Lucky's Anduril. They're building out. China and Russia, I think, manufacture 3 to 4 million drones a year. They just signed a deal, Trump administration, with these companies. They want to start producing millions and millions of drones in America per year. And now add that to the policing aspect of what you just described, right? Flock. And then, so basically where we're headed, if we go a step further to what you outlined, I had Edwin Black on 5 years ago. He wrote IBM and the Holocaust. And I always point to the connections going back a century, where you had IBM creating the first paper computer for the Nazi regime to classify everybody. Mm-hmm. And then COVID came. Who was helping develop the COVID digital app? IBM. Who Edwin Black points out that the eugenicist ideology in Germany came first from the Anglo-American establishment. You had the first concentration camps or attempts to build them out in America and gas chambers. And you had all of these foundations like Rockefeller and whatnot who were eugenicists advising that. Who was advising COVID policy? Rockefeller Foundation. So you see that sort of same nexus that's always been there between the public and private partnership. And so he calls this the algorithm ghetto. So if you compare to Jews or whatever people group that were put into physical ghettos, like in Germany, or camps, gulags. Mm-hmm. Now you have this sort of algorithm ghetto. It's known also as the social credit system. You can call it, technocracy, algocracy, electronic concentration camps. I was shocked to discover 5 years ago where I live in Mexico, it's officially known as a resilient city, and it's financed by the Rockefeller Foundation. Resilient city is a synonym for, they call it 15-minute cities, smart cities. And so this is being beyond America. This is a global project. And living in this, just to go a step further, everything you outlined, they're talking now about, geolocation. They're getting rid of cash. Kyrgyzstan last week, the government came out and said shops can no longer accept cash. You have to get a point of service terminal, and customers can only pay with digital, physical digital cards, contactless, facial recognition, whatever. And then you've got CBDCs, geolocation, and then the hate speech laws that are coming in that link you. If you commit a thought crime, you can have your account disabled. Like I had my PayPal disabled by the Department of Homeland Security and CISA, which is the cyber infrastructure agency. And so, yeah. And any thoughts on sort of that dystopia? You mentioned dystopia that we're headed to, because I think that, would you agree this is like the main end game boss?
I do. It's interesting. I could not have told you the name of the author of IBM and the Holocaust, but I read that book a number of years ago. And for anyone not familiar with the book, the author talks about going into the Holocaust Museum, and one of the first exhibits in the Holocaust Museum is an IBM punch card machine. And he said that growing up, he had seen that in the museum, but he didn't really understand what's the connection with this punch card machine, an early mechanical computer. What's its connection to the Holocaust? And he studied that. He has reached out to IBM to let IBM tell their side of the story, and IBM refuses to talk about it. But the bottom line is, in Germany and in other places in Europe, punch cards started being used for census taking. And let's go way, way back. Let's talk Old Testament times. King David. King David started getting proud, and he decided to number his army. And his military general basically said, please don't do this. God had blessed King David. He had blessed the people. And this was really a point of pride. You have a massive army. You are winning all of these battles. Does it really matter exactly how many soldiers you have? Why do you want to know this? For bragging rights? But the military general under King David said, don't make me do this. David wanted to number the troops. The point is, coming forward, there has been an aversion to numbering. And when census went from something kept in a ledger book to something kept on punch cards, when Germany started going on tour through Europe, they were using IBM computers to catalog people. And when they have electronic records, when they have paper records in punch card readable format, if I want a list of where people of Jewish descent live, let's do a search for that using the punch cards. Boom, here is your list of people to go round up. We know this from the records that have been kept. And that was World War II. What we have today is so much more advanced than that. This is something, I've been talking about Flock. I've been talking about Palantir. There's another company I want to put on the radar for people. You can go to fogdatascience.com, fogdatascience.com, and you will learn about a new threat, a complementary threat to our privacy. Everybody's got one of these in their back pocket. Everybody has apps on their phone. And many of these apps ask for permissions that they don't need. I recently made a video on my YouTube channel, YouTube/at Business Reform. But you can go out and watch that video, and I talk about how to make an iPhone more private. Now, it's still not going to be as private as what an above phone is, but if you carry an iPhone, which about 56% of the public do in the United States, I go step by step over how you can make that more private. One of the things that you do is you go into your settings and you look at what all apps have access to your location and start turning them off. You have exercise apps that want to know your location. You have a Starbucks app. You have a McDonald's app. You have all of these apps, and every one of them want to know your location. And it's kind of advertised as for convenience. If you want a Big Mac and the McDonald's app knows your location, it can give you directions to the nearest McDonald's. What they don't tell you is that many of these apps are constantly collecting your location, and then they are selling that to Fog Data Science. Fog Data Science, this is another end run around the Fourth Amendment, just like flock safety. Fog Data Science, they brag on their website, and again, anyone can go see this for themselves, fogdatascience.com. They brag on their website, we collect billions of location points per day. And so if I am law enforcement and I pay about $7,000 a year for a subscription to Fog Data Science, I can pick a geographic location. I can put in a time range between 1 and 2 o'clock today at this location. Tell me every phone that was in 100 yards of that location. Boom. I've got a list of every phone that was within 100 yards of that location during that 1 hour. And then I can say, all right, give me every phone that was within 100 yards of this location at this time. And then I can compare between them. Okay, I'm looking for somebody that was here at 10 a.m. and here at noon. I got it because going through Fog Data Science, there's only one phone that was in both locations at those times. Now show me everywhere that phone has been. And so now it's going to show me like a breadcrumb. That phone went here, then it went here, then it went here for 14 hours where it spent the night. Then it went here, and it went back here for 14 hours where it spent the night. Doesn't take me long to figure out where that person lives. Fog Data Science can't tell me who that person is, but when I see where they spend the night every night, it doesn't take me long to look up that address and see who lives there. This is happening today. This is not science fiction. It is being accessed by law enforcement today without a warrant. Again, turning the Fourth Amendment on its head because law enforcement is using this to track people. And one of the most annoying things to me, I try to remain calm when people say this, but it gets increasingly challenging. Well, if you're not doing anything wrong, what difference does it make? Okay, let me give you a scenario. You take your 6-year-old daughter to the park, and there is some creepy guy sitting on a park bench with a telephoto lens taking pictures of your daughter. Don't worry about him. Your daughter's not doing anything wrong. Well, wait a minute. Most parents, I actually had AI make a picture of a creepy looking guy sitting on a park bench in a children's playground holding a telephoto camera. And I showed that AI generated image to a friend of mine. And I don't know if you're familiar with micro expressions, but I showed him the picture and I watched as his nostrils flared. The visceral reaction of a parent thinking about somebody sitting on a park bench using that camera to take pictures of their daughter, there is a visceral reaction to that. You shouldn't worry, though. Your daughter's not doing anything wrong. It's not about your daughter. It's about him. You know, why are you upset? Well, you're upset because you don't know what that guy's going to do with those pictures. What's he going to do with it? Who's he going to share those pictures with? This is my daughter. Well, if you don't want your daughter photographed, you ought to leave her in the house, because if she steps outside of the house, she has no right to privacy. Bull. So anyway, this whole concept of if you're not doing anything wrong, you shouldn't worry about it, that is a flawed premise. It's putting the burden on you to justify, well, I'm not doing anything wrong. That's not the question. The question is, why do you want to monitor me? privacy is not about hiding what you're doing. Privacy is about consent. And I've used this example before. Person A and person B meet, they decide to go on a date together. And what happens on a first date? I tell somebody a little bit about me, they tell me a little bit about them. If there's no red flags, we seem to be getting along, I'll reveal a little bit more about me, maybe something from my childhood, maybe something from my education, maybe something from work. But there is this back and forth mutual disclosure. I'm going to tell some things about myself, you're going to share some things about yourself. At any point, if one of us gets uncomfortable, like, "Ooh, I didn't know that you did that," I'm not really interested in continuing this conversation. But the point is, it is mutual disclosure. I share what I want, when I want, how I want. That's privacy. I am in control of my information, and I will share what I want when I'm ready to share it. Lack of privacy is a third party coming in saying, "Oh, you're going on a date with so-and-so, $10, you can have their life history. Here's where they went to school. Here's who they're related to. This is what their brother got in trouble for last year with law enforcement." That's a violation of consent. You are sharing information about me without my permission. And I have a big problem with that. But the best answer I've ever heard to the argument, well, if you're not doing anything wrong, you shouldn't worry. Last July, I started what I called the Brush Fires of Freedom Tour. I've been traveling around the United States since July. We're recording this the week before Thanksgiving. But since July of this year, I have spoken 12 times in 10 different states. And I was out west and doing a live event. And I use that expression about how much it grates on me when people say, if you're not doing anything wrong, you shouldn't worry. And a person spoke up in the audience, and he had the best response I've ever heard. He said, "The next time someone says that to you, ask them, who gave you the right to decide if you're doing anything wrong?" And I thought, wow, that is a great response, because I know what I'm doing is legal, but has anyone ever gotten in trouble over something they said in a text message and social media? Has anyone ever gotten in trouble over something they said 12 or 15 years ago that nobody thought twice about at the time, but today, taken out of context, it sounds horrible? Yeah, we've seen celebrities, we've seen sports stars, we've seen a number of people get in serious trouble, lose their job because of a comment they made 12 or 15 years ago that was taken out of context. And so the idea of who gave you the right to decide if you're doing something wrong is spot on. What I'm doing today may be perfectly acceptable by everyone's standards today, but 10 years down the road, societal norms have shifted, and now AI can pull up things that it recorded you doing 10 years previously. Hey, look what so-and-so did. They're a horrible person.
So I two questions here. I still have a question on the algorithm I want to get back to, but you brought out what you brought up now, which I also had a question on, and I want to keep the data collection thing in mind. And I want to use a personal example from just yesterday. And some listeners know I've alluded to this, and so in 2020, so I live in a gated community in Mexico, and you have it's not quite a homeowners association, but you have like an administrator that we pay. This person happens to live in the gated community, and then you have some of the folks who live here form the board to help make decisions. And when COVID 1984 happened, I was on record in the beginning saying this was all about bringing in global algocracy, ruled by AI and ruled by algorithm. And now you have Joe Rogan and Mark Andreessen. Joe Rogan had Mark Andreessen on saying, yeah, we should have AI and algorithms running the government. And it's like, I literally predicted that. And I told my wife in 2020, I said, watch, sometime in the near future, you're going to see in our gated community, when they install facial recognition and QR codes and apps. Like, I was worrying about this 5 years ago. I literally told my wife, and I said, I'm not going to do this. And here we are. Yesterday, I go to buy bread or something, And as I'm leaving, I see the contractor finish installing the facial recognition camera, biometric facial recognition camera, and biometric fingerprint reader. And I go to exit, and the door's locked, and normally you have a physical key card. And I tell the security guy, in Mexican, in Spanish, and I think this is one of the solutions. Most people are cowards. And I told my wife, I shouted to the security guard. I'm like, "What is this?" And he comes up. He's like, "Oh yeah, you register. You have to register your face or your fingerprint." And I, in a very loud, unabashed, unashamed, burly voice, say, I'm not doing this. And he's like, "Really?" Like in Spanish, he's like, "Really?" I'm like, "I'm not going to participate in this." And I go to the administrator and I say, "Where's the physical key card?" And he's like, "Oh, the contractor, he didn't bring them, but supposedly he's supposed to bring it." I'm not doing this. Like, nonchalant. And I do not care if I become a pariah in the entire community. And I told her, I'm Dalmatian heritage. Us from the Balkans, we're crazy when you mess with us. Serbs and Croats and Bosniaks. I will be utterly defiant. I do not care if the whole community thinks I'm crazy. I remember during COVID, we had a homeowners meeting in the park. I counted 50 of us. I was literally the only one that did not wear a face mask. All 49 others had a face mask. And I was waiting. I was just waiting for someone to tell me something. I was just like, I'm ready. No one said anything. But that's just an example. And so, so I'm getting to my question, a few questions here. I looked, and they want us now to use an app to manage everything. If you have a visitor, you generate a QR code for the visitor. You make your payments. You surveil everyone with the app. And if someone says something wrong, you can take a photo and put it in the app if they do something wrong. And first of all, it's a developer in Mexico, in another state. I don't know who this person is. There's not strong privacy laws in Mexico. This app will collect all of my data, the people in my house, my vehicle registration, coming and going, who visits me. We had in the past history of our gated community, there were 2 previous administrators who stole the money from the annual. They stole some money from us. So So going back to your question, and I'm trying to, these people have no conception. The Mexicans that I live with, they love the technocracy. I think about Aldo Huxley, who says people will love their server. They love the comfort of the apps. They don't think about freedom. They don't read. There was an article from New York Times many years ago that says Mexicans don't generally, statistically, don't really read. And so my point is, a future administrator can sell off my biometric fingerprint or my facial recognition, or the security company that's working. And so just any thoughts on this situation? Is there a danger to me registering my biometric with this private company? The data can be sold. Should I do it? What do you think?
I'm sorry, I was making a couple of notes because you brought up so many things in that last 2 minutes that I wanted to respond to. Talking about forms of government, I heard somebody recently use this term I had never heard before, but I love the term because it is so accurate. I'm sure you've heard the expression tech bros, and tech bros, just like PayPal mafia. Well, somebody took tech bros and they coined the term the broligarch. And so, you've got oligarchs. There was a book written recently called Controligarchs, but I think broligarchs is probably the most accurate. Well, Controligarchs is also pretty good. Talking about people like Bill Gates, Klaus Schwab, Mark Zuckerberg, people that have no problem whatsoever violating your privacy, but don't you even think about getting within a mile of their property, or their armed security will come out to meet you, and that won't be pleasant. Mark Zuckerberg violate the privacy of hundreds of millions of people, but do not get anywhere near his gated compound in Hawaii, or you might just get shot. So anyway, you bring up such great points about the homeowners association, or whatever term is used for the equivalent of a homeowners association. Here in the United States, where flock cameras are being used, we already know of at least two, and I have heard, I need to look this up and get the exact details, but I know there are at least two police officers. One is a police chief, one is a police lieutenant. The lieutenant is now sitting in jail because he was using flock safety cameras to stalk his ex-girlfriend. And there is a police chief who had to resign because he used flock safety to run the license plates of his ex-wife 164 times. And then when he found out she was dating, he ran the license plate of her new boyfriend 64 times. And here's the scariest part of all. How was he caught? It was not from an audit of the flock system. If flock is going to exist, if cops are going to use this, number one, I want them required to have warrants before accessing that database. But number two, I want audits done of all access to flock to make sure that when people are using it, they are using it for legitimate investigations and not because somebody cut me off in traffic when I was in my personal car and I want to look up where they live. So I want protections on this. But what these two cops were doing, they're using flock to stalk former love interest. And the police chief who looked up his ex-wife's plates 164 times, her new boyfriend's plates 64 times, you would think that would raise a flag saying, hey, this guy's run the same search for the same license plate 164 times in the last 3 months. Maybe you want to look into why he's checking twice a day on where this person's going. No, that's not how he got caught. He turned out to be a very corrupt police chief. He was under investigation for something completely unrelated. And as Internal Affairs was investigating him, they stumbled upon the fact, oh, and by the way, he's also been using flock to stalk his ex-wife. My point in bringing all this up, who watches the watchers? We're putting all of this infrastructure in place so that law enforcement can go out and keep an eye on us. Who keeps an eye on them? How do we know that they are not abusing this system? And one of the most ludicrous things, I made a video a couple of weeks ago called Flock Safety's God Complex. A God complex is not a diagnosable condition, but it is related to a diagnosable condition called narcissistic personality disorder. A God complex is when somebody feels grandiose, they have delusions of grandeur. And Garrett Langley did an interview with Forbes magazine in which he said that it is the goal of Flock to eliminate crime in America. Okay, a generation ago, we would be calling the guys with the white vest and the white jackets to come out and pay him a visit and lock him up somewhere, because if you really think you're going to eliminate crime in America, you are delusional. Plus, his rationale is, we know that cameras prevent crime. Really? That's why it's impossible to show video evidence of a crime, because if a camera is present, the crime doesn't happen. That's why there has never been a photograph or a video of a crime being committed. Cameras do not prevent crime. On occasion, they may discourage, they may reduce crime, but they are not eliminating crime. And they may help sometimes to catch the bad guy after the crime. But think about this. If cameras prevented crime, why do cops wear bulletproof vests? You've got a body cam. No one's going to commit a crime in front of you. Certainly nobody's going to shoot at you. You got a camera on. Because cops know that cameras don't prevent crime. Otherwise, they don't need a gun. They don't need a vest. They just need a camera. So my proof positive of this, Garrett Langley thinks if we just put up enough surveillance cameras, we will eliminate crime in the United States. Here's my challenge to Garrett Langley. I give you my permission, my blessing, put 100,000 flock cameras inside of one prison in the United States and eliminate crime inside of one prison. And as soon as that prison goes 2 or 3 years without a crime, I'll sit down and talk to you, because you'll have made a believer out of me. Prisoners are subject to zero privacy. They have no Fourth Amendment protection when you're in prison. They're subject to having their cells searched at any time for any reason or for no reason. It could just be random. They're subject to strip searches. Every square inch of that prison is covered by security cameras, usually multiple cameras. In case one goes out, we still have coverage. So in spite of all of the cameras inside of prisons, there were 87 homicides in American prisons over the last couple of years. And this is from an Inspector General's report. Again, I don't say things I can't back up. An Inspector General's report from the Department of Justice said that there were 87 homicides in prison. That can't be. There's surveillance cameras there. They prevent crime. Yeah. So what Garrett Langley wants to do is turn America into a stricter prison than a maximum security prison, because he really believes, or he claims to believe, if you just put up enough of my cameras that I'm making money on, if you just put up enough of those, we can eliminate crime in the United States. I reject that. I do not want to live in an open-air prison. And we got a taste of what an open-air prison is just a couple of weeks ago. There's a police officer by the name of Sergeant Jamie Milliman. He is a police officer with a department that's in a suburb of Denver, Colorado. He made the news in a very unfavorable way when he was harassing an innocent woman on her doorstep, and this is all caught on a Ring doorbell camera. But he tells her, and I quote, "You know we have cameras in that city. You can't get a breath of fresh air without us knowing about it." That is an exact quote from a police sergeant. He's accusing this woman of theft, and he says, "We know it's you," even though she's denying it. "We know it's you because we have flock cameras in that city." And they recorded her vehicle about a half mile from where the crime occurred. Somebody stole a package off of a doorstep. And we have a flock camera that places your vehicle within a half mile of where this crime occurred. Time for you to go to jail. And she is claiming, "I have no idea what you're talking about." She then has to go out and get the dash cam footage from her vehicle. And thankfully for her, she had it. But here is my dash cam footage from when I went to that neighboring town and came home. You can see every street I drove down. You can look at the timestamps. I didn't stop anywhere other than my destination, which was a tailor. She went to the tailor to either drop off or pick up something that she was having altered. But you can see in her video, I drove down this street. I went to this location. Here's the timestamps. Here's the video from the tailor, because they have security cameras around their business. You can see when I went in. You can see when I came out. You can see when I got back in my car and drove home. I did not get within a half mile of the house that had a package stolen off the front step. And that officer, he is berating her. He's accusing her of lying because she claims she's innocent. And he says, "Because you've not been truthful with me." What did she lie about? Her being innocent? She was innocent. And he says this again on camera. He said, I wouldn't be here if I was not 100% sure, 100% that you're guilty." So this officer is 100% sure she's guilty. She puts all of her information together and gives to the police chief. And the police chief says, "We're dropping the charges. Nice job in proving your innocence." Okay, I shouldn't have to prove my innocence. Number two, Sergeant Milliman, where's your apology? You were 100% sure. You said it twice. You were 100% sure she's guilty. Where's the apology? The news station reached out to Sergeant Milliman and he did not respond. And here is my big concern, and I want to make Sergeant Milliman and his quote about "you can't get a breath of fresh air without us knowing it," I want to make him the poster child for the surveillance state. He was 100% sure. How many times has Sergeant Milliman testified in front of a jury 100% sure that the defendant is guilty, and somebody got sent to jail based on Sergeant Milliman's testimony? Now, I don't know. I have never sat in a courtroom when he was testifying, but I do know this. There have been academic studies about why do jurors believe certain witnesses more than other witnesses, because it's common in a trial, conflicting witnesses are going to be in the witness stand. Academic studies have looked at why does a juror believe this witness rather than that witness? And it doesn't have to do with how accurate they are. You want to guess what the number one factor is? How confident are they? So you bring up a cop who is wrong, but he is absolutely certain. Well, I've met many people like him in my life. They're frequently wrong, but they're never in doubt. And you put somebody like that with some data from an AI camera in front of a jury and let them go on and on about how certain they are this person's guilty, and you have created the perfect environment for innocent people to go to prison.
You mentioned the cameras previously as well. I mean, we have Jeffrey Epstein. So when they corrupt the government, they can just shut off the camera. Oh, wait, we lost those minutes. Sorry, we don't know what
Shazam.
happened. and just again on my personal example, because I think it's instructive what I was saying in my gated community. So we're not even talking about government, but like I said previously, we had previous administrators who stole our money and ran. We have a private security company that's hired. Cartels infiltrate. There's organized crime. There's just people who are greedy. And so if my fingerprint, biometric fingerprint, and facial scan is now in the database that the private company has access to, or an administrator, isn't there a danger that they can take my fingerprint? And my wife's identity was recently stolen and used in the Mexican tax. The Mexican tax office months ago sent her a mail and said, we were told that you received this amount of money in your bank account. So they didn't actually check her bank account. It was just registered that she received this money, that she worked for 11 companies simultaneously, which is not possible. So would you agree when I try to tell people, it goes back to what you're saying. I have nothing to hide. I haven't done anything wrong. This is really cool. I can scan my finger. It's like, wait a minute, that your biometric print can't be sold off, and then tomorrow you can have your data stolen. The Mexican tax office can come after you. Would you agree that that's something possible, and that you shouldn't just give up your biometrics that easy?
100% agree. I teach for a Big Ten university, and one of the classes that I teach is a graduate course in data analytics. And in my class, we go over a number of places where data has been collected and then data has been used for other purposes. And this is one of the big takeaways that I really try to instill in my students. If I know something, it could be a business plan. It could be, my daughter's birthday. If I know something, I have control over it. But once I tell one other person, they have control over it. Once I give that information away, and it does not matter in the least why I give it away, once I give that information away, that other person now has access to it. They can do whatever they want with it. And let me give you a classic example. This is something the U.S. federal government lied about for 70 years. You had mentioned earlier, I believe, it may have been before we started recording, but we were talking about during World War II, the internment camps. And during World War II, the United States federal government started rounding up American citizens of Japanese descent. And we had to do this for national security. You can do anything under the guise of national security. The Epstein files that are being reduced, the Attorney General can still redact whatever she wants for national security. Whoa, that should be a huge red flag. You've got a pedophile offering services to rich people. Why is that a national security issue? Why should she have to redact anything for national security? That is a huge red flag. That's a whole other topic. But my point is, when people give up information, it can be misused. During World War II, a decision was made. We are going to round up Americans of Japanese descent. We are going to put them in internment camps away from the coastlines for national security. Many people are aware that this happened. Fewer people are aware we also rounded up Americans of German descent. We also rounded up Americans of Italian descent. The numbers were a lot smaller than the Americans of Japanese descent, but we rounded up Americans of 3 different nationalities and put them in internment camps. Here's the million-dollar question. How did we know where to find them? There were rumors going clear back to World War II when the U.S. Army was pulling up in front of houses, going in and grabbing families, pulling them out of their houses, and forcibly relocating them to internment camps. There were rumors that they were using Census Bureau data. And the Census Bureau was indignant. We had nothing to do with that. This is sacred. We would never share this information with the military. This is sacred. It's private. We never share this information. They maintained that for 70 years until some researchers going through the National Archives found the proverbial smoking gun where the Census Bureau had given all that information to the military. Oh, oh yeah. Well, that wasn't me. I've only been here for 20 years. That happened 70 years ago. Nothing to see here. Yeah, we made a mistake. Actually, we did give that information to the military. But, well, the point is, under law, you are required to fill out census forms. And it says all over it. I filled out census forms every 10 years. It says all over there, this information's private. Tell the truth because this is private. And we will never, ever give this information away unless the government asks us to. We are the government. So once you give away information, it's gone forever. So coming back to your question about biometrics, here's the first problem. You give up any information, including your fingerprints, including facial recognition scans, you give that up to a private contractor. Number one, it may already be in their privacy policy. We can share this with our business partners. And share is a nice way of saying anyone who gives us money, we may give it to them. Even if they have a clause in the privacy policy that says we won't share it. Okay, that's nice. What happens when your company gets bought out by a bigger company? Because I don't know how it is in Mexico, but in the US, big companies buy little companies every day. And when they buy a little company, all of the data that company has becomes the property of the big company. So even if this is an honest company, we have strict policies, we will never do that. But when we get bought out, now somebody else is in control of your data. You never know when a company is going to get a data breach. And if anyone thinks that there is a company on earth immune from a data breach, you're wrong. Office of Management and Personnel, the OMP, that is a branch, or it's an executive branch office in the federal government here in the States. OMP was hacked around 2018 or 2019 by the Chinese Communist Party. They got all of the personal information for every federal employee and every federal contractor. And for people that have a security clearance, they got all of the application forms for security clearances. That's important because if you have a security clearance, maybe you're working in the FBI or you're working in military intelligence, there is about a 50-page form, and I am not exaggerating, 50-page form where you have to disclose virtually everything. It's almost like a Catholic going to confession. Here's everything I've ever done wrong in my life that I can remember. You have to divulge that. Have you ever used drugs? Have you ever done this? Have you ever done this? Some of it would be very embarrassing if it got out, but you have to disclose it because the government is going to evaluate this in deciding whether or not to grant you a security clearance. In addition, you may be 50 years old. You graduated high school 32 years ago. If any of your teachers are still alive, the FBI might go pay them a visit to say, do you remember so-and-so? They're going to go back and talk to the neighbors that you had 20 years ago. They're going to go back and talk to your coworkers from 15 years ago. They're doing these background checks before they give a security clearance. All of that information was in the database that was maintained by the Office of Management and Personnel. All of that data was hacked by the Chinese Communist Party. So now all of that information is in the hands of a country that makes hostile gestures towards other countries. The biggest one, the National Security Agency, arguably the most powerful, most influential surveillance apparatus in the world. the National Security Agency got hacked. And it's not just the employee directory that got hacked. What got hacked at the NSA was known as the Cyber Arsenal. The Cyber Arsenal is the most advanced electronic tools that the NSA has for breaking into electronic devices, for eavesdropping on people, for tracking people across the internet. The Cyber Arsenal is the most sophisticated electronic weapons that they have at their disposal for spying on people. Those got stolen. And if the NSA can't protect their most important tools from hackers, what's the odds that your local security company running the cameras at your gated community are going to be able to keep hackers out? Zero. So even if they have a great privacy policy, even if it's privately held and they would never sell out to a bigger company, how are they going to guarantee that your data is not stolen by hackers? They can't.
Which is, it's always, why not just I want to keep analog. It's the most private and safest way. I have a physical key card. You don't have my biometric face or fingerprint, and I just have a physical card. Like we've been doing it for 5,000 years of human history. And I just want to close off the point of the open air digital prison, so to speak. And again, from my vantage point here in Mexico, the Mexican government was the first to buy Israeli spyware Pegasus, and then they bought a second one called Titan, whose back end was also created by Israelis. And with Titan and Pegasus, this software is given to cartels because they've infiltrated the government, and then the licenses are shared or resold to cartels. So now imagine when criminals who extort and kidnap, they can just put in your phone number, and immediately it's kind of like Palantir, what they're doing, and Flock and all that. With Pegasus and Titan, with the Titan software here in Mexico, you type in my name, you get my bank account, I guess how much I have there, my health records, my other government documents, and then you get my geolocation because you get my mobile number, which pings, right? And now you know where I am. And if you're organized crime, if you can see how much money I have and think I'm a target, you can come kidnap, extort. And then I thought of Argus. You mentioned this other software. You've got the drones now that stay 24 hours in the air and record high resolution. And just like you said, I saw this report a few years back. They can go back on whatever date at 3 p.m. and zoom into your front yard and backyard and see what you're doing. And again, Minority Report implications, but sort of this social credit system, you've got digital ID now coming in. They want to get rid of cash. And ultimately, if this system comes to be, it's an open air prison. And if you do something that somebody doesn't like, you can have your bank account disabled. You can have your car disabled. Because now cars in the future will have the remote kill switch, right? And so you can have your car disabled. You can't go anywhere. You can't use money. You can't buy an airplane ticket. You can't renew your driver's license or passport. And so just any thoughts on that, as well as any, biblical insights you have here? Because for me, on the one hand, like you said earlier, I still think we must fight and resist de facto. That will never change. Regardless of what the outcome will be, we must resist. But on the other, I think for me, like my interpretation of the Bible, it alludes to that things will just continue to get worse. And so, any thoughts on this what happens if digital ID comes in, and then we're in this sort of cashless system, and then if you have any biblical sort of insights or interpretation?
Absolutely, and I appreciate those questions. When I graduated college in 1988, I went to work in the automotive industry, and my specific job was designing HVAC control systems. So being an electrical engineer and designing control systems, this is kind of the way that I see the world, a control system. And I'm going to use an analogy that everyone can relate to. In your home, you probably have a thermostat. And the thermostat has a couple of pieces to it. There is a sensor located somewhere in your home. Very often, it is inside of the thermostat itself, and your thermostat is usually in a hallway rather than a bedroom. because the hallway is kind of the middle of the house. It's where air circulates. And if I want to know the temperature of your house, the hallway temperature is probably a better indicator than a bedroom temperature, which may have a door closed and maybe a couple of degrees different than the rest of the house. But a control system starts with a sensor, and the sensor collects information, and then it feeds it to the controller. And what the controller does, it has a simple purpose in life. My sensor tells me what's going on. The temperature in the house is 69 degrees. And I have a set point. Somebody has come up to the thermostat and set it to be 72 degrees. And what the controller does is it compares, here's what is 69 degrees, here's what I want it to be, 72 degrees, and then it makes a decision. I need to turn on the furnace to warm up the house. And so then it sends an output to turn on the furnace. Repeat. What's the temperature? It's still 69. It's still below what I want it to be. Leave the furnace on. Well, over the next few minutes, the house is going to warm up because the furnace is on. Eventually, the sensor is going to say it's 72 degrees. The controller is going to say, I want it to be 72. It is 72. Turn off the furnace. Now, depending on where you live, maybe later in the day, it gets warmer. It's now 74 degrees. The controller looks at the sensor. It's 74 degrees. I want it to be 72. Turn on the air conditioner. I'm going to bring the temperature back down. But I just want to get these three elements. There's the sensor, there's the controller, and there's the output. And the output then feeds back to the sensor because whatever the output does, turn on the furnace, turn on the air conditioner, it's going to adjust the temperature, and the sensor tells me when it gets to where I want it to be. These three elements are playing out right now with privacy. There are powerful entities. Sometimes it's governments. Sometimes I believe that it's large global organizations. Sometimes it's people like Larry Ellison with his James Bond villain aspirations. But he said, we are going to be monitored. Yes, that's the sensor for the control. We are going to be monitored by AI. That's the controller. So AI is going to be looking at inputs, and then it's going to be evaluating, are people behaving the way we want them to behave? And if not, we're going to turn on some controller to alter their behavior. Okay, let's just think what this looks like. What are the inputs? AI cameras and doorbells, body cameras that are worn by police, dash cams, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We have video streams coming from all over, drones, flock safety license plate readers. We have a ton of sensors collecting information about each one of us. Fog data science. Where did you go yesterday? Well, I can see how long you stayed at the coffee shop. I can see how fast you drove between point A and point B. I have all of your location data. I have access to your text messages. I know what you said to so-and-so, and I really don't like that opinion that you expressed because so-and-so that you were that you were complaining about, they're really a good guy, and you don't really have a right to talk negatively about that person. So I need to alter your behavior to, how can we have a united country if you don't believe what I tell you? So you are expressing wrong opinions. I need to alter your behavior. So what do I need to control? AI this. What do I need to do to get your attention and get you to behave properly? Well, I don't want to be too harsh. Maybe I'm just going to cut down on how many miles you can drive next week. Because your car is online. I know how many miles you drive per week. I'm just going to throw a limit on there. Rather than the 100 miles that you're normally allowed to drive, you only get to drive 50 miles next week. That's a minor inconvenience. And if you don't post anything I don't like for the next month, I may restore you back to 100 points. But if that doesn't get through to you, I may need to restrict for the public good. I may need to restrict your access to your funds in your bank account. Now, you may have 5 or 10 grand sitting in your savings account, but I may decide you can only withdraw $20 a day. Okay, I didn't cut off your funds. You still have access to your money, just not as fast as you would like. Or if you're really egregious, if you complain about what I'm doing to you, I could just cut you off altogether. You don't have access to the money in your bank. Your car won't start. Um, Based on what you just described about your gated community, you might not be able to get home. There is a classic scene, and I encourage everyone to watch this movie. I'm going to make a video about this movie in the near future, probably January or February. But there was a movie from the early 2000s called The Lives of Others. And The Lives of Others is a period piece set in East Germany shortly before the Berlin Wall fell. And in this movie, there is a classic scene. You have the corrupt government officials, and one of them gets infatuated with a beautiful woman who is a ballet dancer. Unfortunately for the corrupt government official, she has a fiance. Well, we need to get him out of the way. Get somebody to watch that guy and figure out what we can charge him with. He needs to go to prison so that she will be available. And at his whim, we're going to go bug their apartment with listening devices so that if they say anything subversive or we find out about any illegal activity, we can go arrest the fiance because I want her to be single. So in the movie, it cuts to a van full of guys sitting out in front of their apartment, and they're watching for this young couple to leave. And as soon as they leave, the sliding door opens, a couple of guys go in with suitcases, and these are the tools and the microphones they're going to hide in their apartment so they can listen to everything being said. Now, keep in mind, this movie is set 1970s, 1980s, before we had the electronics that we do today. But you've got a team of government surveillance specialists. Think of a FBI black bag operation. They're in there putting bugs all over this young couple's apartment, hiding microphones behind wall outlets, hiding microphones in lamps. A neighbor is looking through the peephole into the hallway, watching this group go into the neighbor's apartment. And the guy in charge of the surveillance crew, he notices a shadow pass over the peephole. He knows that somebody in this other apartment is watching us go in and bug this apartment. Obviously, you don't want her warning this couple, be careful what you say. And so he just very calmly walks over, knocks on the door. There's a hesitation before a very scared woman opens the door. And she's kind of looking down at the ground, and he calls her by name because, of course, he knows who she is. He knows everyone that lives in this apartment, and he knows her name. So he calls her by name, and she kind of looks up a little surprised that this stranger knows her name. And he very calmly tells her that you did not see anything today. We were never here. And I'm sure your daughter at such and such university would appreciate it if you don't cause any problems for us. You know, he doesn't have to threaten what's going to happen to your daughter. Just mentioning your daughter at this university is enough to put chills down her spine. What's going to happen to my daughter if I don't comply? And so she very meekly and humbly nods her head like, I agree, I didn't see anything. And about that time, one of his guys is walking out of the apartment. They're done placing all the microphones. And he turns around to one of his employees, and he said, send Mrs. So-and-so here some flowers to thank her for her compliance. And it is so ominous. You know, he didn't have to threaten. Just mentioning the personal information, calling her by name, mentioning where her daughter goes to college, he got the message communicated. You're going to comply or you will suffer immensely. And she very meekly accepted the terms. I won't say a thing. And I want to come back to what you said earlier about you speaking up very vocally about, I didn't agree to this. I am with you 100. We are brothers in spirit when it comes to that. I will not comply. I teach for a university, and something happened during COVID. I serve on the faculty senate at my campus. Any policy decision that impacts faculty is supposed to be run through the faculty senate. The president of the university, now we have a new president now, but the old president who was there during COVID, he put out a message to all faculty, staff, and students at the university saying, you must be vaccinated. And there was no ifs, ands, or buts. If you are not vaccinated, you will be unenrolled from the university. For faculty and staff, this is a condition of employment. You must be vaccinated. I contacted my division head, a great guy. I think the world of him. But I contacted him and I said, I'm not doing it. And I said, I know this is not your decision, but I just want you to know if this results in my termination, I don't take it personal against you. I know that you had nothing to do with this. And he said, let's hope it doesn't come to that. Well, right after the president of the university issued this very threatening message to all faculty, staff, and students, we have a fantastic attorney general in Indiana. And the attorney general, somebody, it wasn't me, but somebody forwarded that email to the attorney general of Indiana. And within about 48 hours, he publicly posted a response to the president of the university, reminding the president of the university, your email violates Indiana state law. We have a religious exemption act. And if a person has a religious objection to a vaccination, the law protects them. And the attorney general made it very clear, I have instructed my office to be on the lookout for anyone reporting violations of the Religious Exemption Act, or excuse me, Religious Freedom Act is what it's called. But he fired back at fired back at the president of the university saying, your email is illegal. You're threatening people with termination for exercising protected rights. And long story short, that email went out without the approval of the faculty senate. So after the fact, I'm in a faculty senate meeting shortly thereafter, and it comes up as a vote. We need to vote to concur with what the president of the university said, because he got out ahead of himself issuing this email before the faculty senate had voted on it. And there was a vote, are we going to concur with what the president of the university said? And it's a voice vote. All in favor say aye, and nearly everyone in the room said aye. And then they ask, any opposed? Now, in a voice vote, the easy thing to do would be sit there quietly. I certainly didn't vote yes. It would have been so easy to not vote no, and the meeting just go on and it would look unanimous. I was the lone person in the room to say no. And instantly, every head in the room turns and looks at me. I'm not backing down. I do not vote to concur with that mandate. And so it was recorded as there was one no vote. It didn't change the outcome, but I'm not going to back down and say, yeah, it's okay with me. You can do this. If I have to stand alone, I will stand alone. What I'm seeing from my YouTube channel is I'm not standing alone. There are a lot of people that agree with me and you that don't like what's going on. There are two problems, though. Number one, they don't know how to push back. And that's something that I try to provide some guidance on my YouTube channel, is how do we legally push back on this? And I want to stress the word legally, because I am not calling for any type of illegal behavior. There are legal ways of pushing back on this. Using the Freedom of Information Act, or some places call it the Open Records Act, that is one way of legally pushing back on this. And in my videos, you can look at my most recent video. The video is called 3 Legal and Effective Ways to Push Back on Surveillance. But I encourage people, watch that video and put it into action. You mentioned biblical tie-ins with all of this. There is one passage in particular that resonates with me, and this is Jesus talking to his apostles. This is Matthew chapter 10 and verse 16. Jesus instructs his disciples to be, quote, wise as serpents and harmless as doves. And as Christians, I'm a Christian myself. As Christians, I think as a whole, we do pretty good on the harmless as doves for the most part. I think it's the being wise as serpents that a lot of people struggle with. They get they get too tied up in what's going on in their life, their job, their kids. And I'm not knocking that. I want you to be involved in your kids' lives. We need to earn money to support ourselves, but we also have to be aware of what's going on around us. And one of the things that I think was a wake-up call for so many people, and this I find so deeply disturbing, I call it a preview of where all of this is going. Let's just back the calendar up to 2020. What did we see taking place? Well, we have to stop the spread of the pandemic. Therefore, churches are ordered to be closed because you're non-essential. If people get together in groups to worship, a disease may spread. Now, bars, marijuana dispensaries, strip clubs, those are essential. Those need to stay open. I'm sorry, but in what universe is a disease more likely to spread in church than a strip club? It's ludicrous. But that event tells us volumes about the mindset of those in power. I will ban you from worship, but it's okay to go out, get your alcohol, your marijuana, and go to strip clubs. That really says all that you need to know about the mindset of so many people in power today. Not everyone, this didn't happen across the entire United States, but it did happen in places. The other thing that I found incredibly disturbing was how quickly Americans were willing to turn on each other and rat each other out because the government stoked fear. When the governor says you are not allowed to have more than 4 people in your home at Thanksgiving, or you're not allowed to have more than 4 people in your home at Christmas, and there were reports of this, there was video of this from police body cameras. Some person, my next door neighbor has 2 cars in their parking lot, and I watched 6 people go into their house. Well, call the SWAT team. Someone needs to die. They disobeyed orders. Shoot first, and we'll sort it out later. It irritated me beyond words that busybodies were out there reporting on their neighbors for violating unconstitutional mandates, and they are unconstitutional. But anyone that participated in ratting out their neighbors, having police sent in to break up Christmas parties, I hope those people are ashamed of themselves.
And you just made me think when we first went to Kazakhstan and attended a Baptist church there in 2017, their communion was communal. They used real wine, but they would have one, I guess, for each aisle, two jugs, and they put wine, and they would just pass it, and everyone took a sip. And so that was alien to me, but I thought, okay, everyone's doing it. It's real wine, so I guess the alcohol deals with the bacteria. And then I was at when I first came across, I was like, whoa! But I did it, and then COVID came along. Well, then they shut the churches down. The government did. I mean, but we still met secretly as house churches.
Yes,
which shows that okay, we literally cannot meet because it's an authoritarian government. But we continued visiting each other in our homes. And I guess to ask you, because we've hit time. And I wanted to get to solutions, and I'll direct people to your YouTube. And hopefully in the near future, we might meet in person. I'll just leave it at that. And we can do a subsequent interview on and looking at solutions in detail. But if not, we can have another virtual call, perhaps podcast next year. But any other thoughts on what to do? It seems like the smartphone is the principal gateway to the panopticon. You seem optimistic that we can put the panopticon genie back in the bottle. Just any other broad thoughts on what can we do to resist, to fight this?
I use this analogy for anyone familiar with American football. We're at the beginning of the 4th quarter, and we're down by 3 touchdowns. The game's not over. And I am the person that will play my heart out till the final bell. I do not believe in giving up, especially when it comes to my rights. I do not want my children living in an open-air prison. And so I will fight this with my last breath. We have a lot of work ahead of us. I am still optimistic that it can be turned around, but it's going to take more than just me and you. We've got to get more people standing up, speaking up, being willing to be the one saying, I do not consent, and pushing back on this. There's an expression in politics: politicians always see the light right after they feel the heat. And we've got to start legally pushing back and making sure that they feel the heat, showing up at school board meetings, showing up at city council meetings, showing up at the state legislature. Whatever, depending on where you live in the world, start showing up and making it known that you do not want 24/7 surveillance. You don't want to live in Larry Ellison's dystopian future. So that's the first part. Then there are some self-defense things that we can do, privacy self-defense. If you go out to my YouTube channel, I have a number of videos that go into more details on these, but there's a company called Zenni Optical. They sell eyeglasses. You can get them plain or you can get them prescription, but they have infrared blocking coating on them, and that really messes with facial recognition. If you are wearing them, facial recognition will not work. So that's one thing. You can protect your identity blocking facial recognition. Faraday bags. If you don't have to have your phone on 24/7, and I realize nearly everyone does, but you don't have to. If you don't have to have your phone on, turn it off, stick it in a Faraday bag. I can tell you this from firsthand experience. A couple of weeks ago, I was in Louisville, Kentucky, doing a Brush Fires of Freedom tour. About 5 miles away from us, a UPS plane crashed at the airport, and there was a massive fire. There was several people that lost their lives. But during my presentation in Louisville, every phone in the room went off with an emergency alert, because the mayor of Louisville had put out a citywide emergency alert saying avoid this area, avoid contact with the fumes. 3 people in the room held their phone up, and on their phone there's the emergency alert message, and they said, my phone was off. And I said, no, obviously not. You thought your phone was off because you hit the power button and you thought you turned it off. Your phone is never off. And this is proof positive. I knew this, but now I have actually seen it. That phone that was off started beeping and lighting up the display because an emergency alert was pushed out. The bottom line is, turning your phone off does not remove it from the network. The cell phone towers still know where that phone is, even when it's turned off. And so I encourage people, get a Faraday bag. When you turn your phone off, stick the phone in the Faraday bag. And at that point, you do disappear from the network. Fog data science can't track you when your phone is off and it's in a Faraday bag. Just turning it off, they're still going to get your location information. So Faraday bags for your phones. Using a privacy-oriented phone, I am in process of transitioning away from using my iPhone all the time and using a privacy phone like the above phone. There are other things that you can do using a good VPN. I recommend Mullvad or Proton VPN. But go out and take a look at my YouTube channel. I have a number of videos that focus on how you can improve your personal privacy.
All right, I think we've covered a lot. Any thoughts? Again, my second solution is fight, resist, raise hell, legally, as you say, or it says give to Caesar what is Caesar's and give to God what is God's. But if they do cross a line, I just simply, when it came to the vaccines, for example, I will not comply. So civil disobedience, I think, is another option where if you can't fight legally, well, I'm just not going to comply with an edict that is evil. I'm not going to inject myself with some mystical elixir from companies who are known homicidal maniacs. And I say that with proof because we've had RFK Jr. or others who, how many times have these big pharma companies been taken to court and it's been proven that some of the other drugs that they sold they were knowingly killing people with these drugs. Mm-hmm. So why would I take a magical elixir from a company that another product they knowingly killed people with? Anyways, I often think of, but if times do get tough, I'm now considering, but because I foresaw this moment years ago, I told my wife we need to move, because this is not a good place to be. If all of my neighbors are digital fascist commies, it's not a good place to be. And so if times do get tough, I guess the other big solution is to remove yourself from urban areas, no, and to have where you at least have sovereignty in terms of your land, and you have your own water on your land, and you can grow food and have animals. Do you think that's also something to think about?
It definitely is, but I consider that a short-term solution because what we're seeing in the United States is more states passing laws regulating things like rainwater collection. So if you move into an area and you're thinking, okay, I don't have any water on this property, but I can do downspout collection and I can run it through filters and I can get water that way. Some states have started banning collecting rainwater. And it really, really makes me wonder, what's your goal? Why does the water that falls on my property, why am I not allowed to use it? And there has been a case that I read about where somebody did rainwater collection, and they were collecting the water, but the overflow was going to a pond that was only like 100 feet away. And why are you making such a big deal out of, I'm collecting some rainwater? Makes no sense to me. I've never heard a good justification for prohibiting people from collecting rainwater. And it's not like 6 million people are doing that in a 100 square mile area and the rivers are going to run dry. We don't have time right now to get into data centers, but you look at how much water is being used by data centers, how much power is being used by data centers, and why are there so many massive data centers being built? Well, AI, of course. The AI overlords, they have a vulnerability when it comes to they need tons and tons of water, tons of power, and I'm not a big fan of funding or subsidizing our AI overlords. I use AI some sparingly. I write all of my own scripts for my YouTube videos, but AI is a tool. I think about George Washington's statement, classic George Washington. He said, "Government is not eloquence. Government is like fire. It's a useful tool, but a severe master." So fire is great when you keep it under control, but when it gets out of control, it's deadly. And he likened government to fire.
All right, we've hit 2 fantastic hours. By the way, I did a poll of my listeners, and it turns out the majority prefer 1 hour or longer podcasts. But the two key indicators are the quality of the guest and the theme, topic, or content. So I think that's what I try to do and focus on. And so people can let me know what they think. But it was great having you on for the first time. If you have any final thought, of course, your links are in the description. So I urge people to subscribe to your YouTube if they haven't. Any final thought? And, again, best places to find you if you have any other project or service.
Well, I will share Benjamin Franklin's words to our fellow founding fathers in America. He said, "We have to hang together, or assuredly we will hang separately." And I call for unity. I get emails regularly because I put my email address in all of my YouTube videos. I get emails regularly from people saying, "I'm from the MAGA wing of the Republican Party." I get other emails from people saying, "I'm a socialist." Most people don't identify their political affiliation because they're not political activists. But when you think about in the United States, we have a lot of people, on opposite sides of many issues. The one thing that I see that unites all of us, nobody wants to be under 24-hour surveillance. And I am absolutely 100% convinced there are people in high places, either in corporate or in government, who are doing their best to fan the flames to make us fight each other because it takes the attention off of what they're doing to all of us. Divide and conquer has been a military strategy since at least 2000 BC, and it's a very effective military strategy. If you can get the other side fighting among themselves, you win. And people in government, people in corporations, all they've got to do is fan the flames and get left and right fighting with each other, and they can do absolutely anything while nobody's paying attention to them. So I really do call for people on both sides. Put our other differences aside for a moment. Let's focus on this threat. Let's come together on this threat. And once this threat has been dealt with, hopefully we can peacefully resolve the other issues that we have. But if we don't come together and unite to push back against this, it's going to be out of our control. And so I just call on everyone, please get active. Please stand up and speak up. And I'll wrap up with this thought. I have had conversations with people before, and they say, I agree with you, but I don't want to say anything because I don't want to wind up on a list. I got news for you. You're already on more lists than you can possibly count. But here's my perspective. I want everyone to stand up. I want everyone to speak up so that list gets so long, the people creating that list are scared and start to reevaluate their life decisions. That is my goal. That is my prayer, that everyone will stand up, unite on this, and jointly, all of us, left, right, center, all of us push back so that we can maintain our freedom to agree or disagree on what we want without having AI overlords or human overlords deciding we're going to modify your behavior by restricting your access to your bank account, restricting how many miles you can drive, etc.
I often sign off with "See you in the algorithm ghetto," or "May the odds ever be in your favor." But I do that tongue in cheek from my cynical Balkan worldview as a form of a clarion call, because I want you to think about how bad things are and are going to get, and unless we do something, that's where we're gonna. I want to sort of scare listeners into, realizing this is bad. We got to do something. Wake up from your slumber, or we really will be seeing each other in the algorithm ghetto. Business reform. Thank you for coming on the podcast, Dr. Padfield.
Thank you very much for having me.